In other global news that we are tracking at this hour, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has announced that he is pausing the controversial judicial overhaul bill, saying that he wanted to give time to seek a compromise over the bill with his political opponents, further asserting on how he was not ready to divide the nation in half. Listen in.
אחריות לאומית. מתוך הרצון למנוע את הקרע בעם, החלטתי להשהות בהי את הקריאה השנייה והשלישית של החוק במושב הזה של הכנסת, כדי לתת זמן לנסות להגיע לאותה הסכמה רחבה לקראת החקיקה במהלך הכנסת הבאה.
Now, the announcement was also made after one of the biggest domestic protest movements in Israeli history. Tens of thousands of Israelis demonstrated outside parliament, and workers also launched a nationwide strike in a dramatic escalation of the mass protest movement in the country. Meanwhile, immediately after Netanyahu's statement, the head of the country's largest trade union said that it would call off a general strike that threatened to grind Israel's economy to a halt. Netanyahu has decided to suspend the vote on the second and third readings of the law in this session of the Knesset until Parliament returns after the break for the Passover holiday. Now, his comments comes days after he sacked his defense minister, who had called for a halt to the legislative process, citing national security concerns. Now, as the Israeli Prime Minister made the announcement, huge crowds gathered in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, including a large counter-demonstration by right-wing supporters of the overhaul. Their presence further prompted fears of possible violence between the two sides, which resulted in the Israeli police using water cannons to disperse the demonstrators. While Netanyahu and his supporters say that the plans would ensure a proper balance between the elected government and the judiciary, critics say that it would destroy the checks and balances which protect the Israeli democracy. The White House has further welcomed Netanyahu's pause on judicial reforms, further adding that the latest announcement comes as an opportunity to create additional time and space for compromise.
So we welcome this announcement as an opportunity to create additional time and space for compromise. Compromise is precisely what we have been calling for, and we continue to strongly urge Israeli leaders to find a compromise as soon as possible.
Meanwhile, Israeli opposition leader Yair Lapid has also said that his party is ready to start a genuine dialogue under certain conditions on the controversial judicial overhaul bill.
שמעתי את הצהרתו של ראש הממשלה נתניהו. אם החקיקה אכן תיעצר עצירה אמיתית ומוחלטת, אנחנו נכונים ללכת להידברות אצל נשיא המדינה.
ראש הממשלה הוא האחראי הראשון לקרע המסתמן בעם. אבל על כולנו, קואליציה ואופוזיציה, נושאים באחריות לאחות אותו. אין לאף אחד את הזכות להשתמט מהחובה הזו.
However, despite Netanyahu pausing the bill, Israelis say that there is no victory at all, and Netanyahu is only taking a break in order to come back stronger.
It's no different than all his statements. It's first of all, it's pure lies, as usual. He's just taking a break in order to come back stronger and to let the people, to send the people home. And he's, as usual, identified the weaker chain guns, and he's trying to start talking with him. It's not going to do anything.
I'm not expecting anything from him. I'm expecting the other ministers in his government to break the coalition, so we will change the whole governmental situation in Israel. I have no expectation whatsoever from Bibi Netanyahu.
For more on this, we're now being joined by our correspondent Jody Cohen, who's joining us live from Renana. Now, hi Jody, tell me, how have people and the opposition reacted to Prime Minister Netanyahu's announcement of a freeze in the judicial reform bill? Will the demonstrations finally stop? Because we've just learned that some demonstrators are saying that this is no victory at all, and maybe Netanyahu will come back stronger.
Right, so the Histadrut, that's the powerful trade union, they've called off their general strike. Protest leaders, now this is the umbrella movement of the protest leaders, they immediately announced that the protest would actually continue. But local media is reporting that today's planned day of paralysis won't go ahead. We might see some focused protests, but on the whole, I've seen WhatsApp messages from protest organisers telling people to get some rest today. But the Saturday night rallies are expected to continue. Now, President Herzog has already spoken with Prime Minister Netanyahu and opposition leaders Lapid and Gantz. Herzog has called on all parties to start immediate negotiations, and we're hearing that by 1 o'clock in the morning today, Gantz has already pulled together his team of negotiators. He's also spoken to Netanyahu to welcome his move to pause the bill, and also asked him to keep Gallant on as defence minister. And remember, Gallant is still technically defence minister because he didn't receive the official dismissal letter. Now, Lapid has been more cautious with his welcome of the freeze, saying that if the legislation genuinely stops, he would be ready to start a genuine dialogue. The Israel Democracy Institute, which is a leading think tank here, they've said that the crisis offers a historic constitutional opportunity, and the White House has welcomed the pause, and Netanyahu is actually expected to virtually address the US State Department's Democracy Summit later on this week. And the US ambassador to Israel has suggested that Netanyahu will now receive an invitation from President Biden to visit him, possibly after the Passover holidays that are coming up.
Right, Jody, also tell us, where does this leave the legislation and the coalition going forward? Also reports of a deal with the radical coalition partners like Ben Gvir.
So in terms of the legislation, Prime Minister Netanyahu has said that he wants to pass the legislation by the summer, but through agreement. As President Herzog said that if one side wins, the state will lose. And interestingly, in an interview in the UK, Netanyahu said that he believes the judiciary is too powerful, but that under the proposals, this would make the parliament too powerful. So he suggested that a balance is needed. And that's a position that many in the opposition also take. So positive signs there that an agreement might potentially be reached. In terms of the coalition, there had been some speculation that National Security Minister Ben Gvir might leave the coalition. In the end, he supported a temporary freeze in exchange for the National Guard that had been promised to him in the coalition agreement. There was also speculation that Benny Gantz could potentially join the coalition if Ben Gvir left, but the coalition is standing by Netanyahu. Smotrich, the leader of the religious Zionism party, has suggested that keeping the coalition together is more important than passing the bills at this stage. And we saw two polls published on Monday that suggested that the support for Netanyahu has fallen and increased for Gantz as a result of the protests we're seeing over the last few weeks. So it looks like the legislation will be sought through consensus and the coalition is staying united.
Right. Thanks, Jody, for getting us up to speed on this. We'll, of course, be tracking this very closely on WION. Thanks very much.
Thank you.